Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Rising prices in Nigeria. We're just going to focus on one company because there's so many layers here. Cussons, which of course is in Manchester in the UK, the consumer goods firm with about a few thousand employees scattered across the globe. They put out a trading update, a Q3 trading update that I mean, my word, we're going to get into this and dig into this as quickly as we can. Talks about the significance of Nigeria to its operations, and also the fact that whenever we talk about a consumer goods company exiting Nigeria, there's always two sides to the story. Let us begin. We start with the outlook, a quote on the outlook, which of course, again, it's a trading update that is given to shareholders. Let's read what that outlook says. The company, this was yesterday, it says, today we are reiterating our full year 2024 outlook, having delivered improved like-for-like revenue growth in Q3 on an improved volume trend, that is sales volumes. Nevertheless, the macroeconomic challenges and complexities associated with operating in Nigeria are significant, and there is much more to do to unlock the full potential of the business. You can see that it's talking about group revenue, but Nigeria is singled out. Let's go to the revenue table because there is a lot that is on that table that speaks to how the company performed and also how important Africa and Nigeria is. You should have the revenue table now in front of you. You will see Europe and the Americas, Asia Pacific, Africa, group total, and group excluding Africa. In pounds sterling, in millions, Europe was tops, 48.5, Asia Pacific second, 42.5, Africa 35.6, and then you got your group total. But look at L for L percentage. That is your like for like. That is, you're comparing year on year or quarter on quarter, right? And essentially removing distortions that artificially inflate or deflate your earnings. So yeah, it's like a comparable store comparison. You're basically saying on an even basis, how did we perform? You will notice that like-for-like revenue declined by 0.4% for Europe and the Americas, declined by 5.7%, but look at Africa, 39.6% performance gain on a like-for-like basis, best performer in the region, and Nigeria is chief reason because of that. However, look to your next column or to the right. That is reported percentage. That reported percentage is on a constant currency basis. That is, we exchange the revenues in each of those particular regions at the current exchange rates where they are now. You will notice that Europe and the Americas, it was just a decline of 1.4%. Asia Pacific, a decline of 10%. Africa, a decline of 48%. Why? Because of the devaluation of the currency. And you will notice that excluding Africa, for like percentage, there's a total decline of 2.9% if Africa is not included. For the reported currency basis, when you exclude Africa, it actually performs better at 6.6%. So you can see the dual narrative here from the perspective of what Africa means in terms of revenue and Nigeria, but also how the currency volatility impacts the company's revenues. Let's go to the quotes on revenue, where they actually talked about that table, which we extracted from the report. The revenue quote says, revenue at a reported FX rates declined by 23.7%, primarily as a result of the devaluation of the Nigerian Naira, which on average 60% lower in the quarter compared to the prior year. So the devaluation very much has a role to play. Let's quickly jump to the Africa prices quotes, where they talked about prices and how they've had to increase prices because of what's going on in Africa. Very, very key here. It says in Africa, we continue to increase prices in the quarter, seeking to offset significant FX-driven cost inflation, which essentially tells you that the inflation that we see, a lot of it is foreign exchange driven as a result of the fact that we are import dependent, and when interest rates and other things are rising or inflation is rising in other countries, we essentially import it in here. Let's move to operating profits, where the company talked about their operating profit and operating profits quotes. They said the group expects to deliver adjusted operating profit in the region 55 million to 60 million pounds for the full year. This is unchanged from the guidance they gave in half year. But look at this. They said it assumes no material adverse movements in the Naira from current levels in the balance of the year. So the group revenues are contingent on the Nigerian Naira being stable. So again, we talk again about the significance of Nigeria to consumer goods companies like the UK-based PZ Cussons. Now, this next quote here on financial leverage, I think, is the crux of what I want to put forward for our audience and you there in the studio. On financial leverage, read this carefully. The company said the group has made further progress in reducing its financial leverage as a result of ongoing repatriation of funds from Nigeria to the UK and its ongoing program to divest non-trading assets. We continue to the repatriation quote. We continue here. It says, in the first 10 months of this financial year, the group has repatriated approximately £35 million of cash from Nigeria and expects to repatriate a further 15 to 20 million pounds before the end. I don't know why they call this fiscal policy, and it should be monetary policy, but be that as it may, let's look at their fiscal policy quotes. They said this improvement has been underpinned by fiscal policy changes in Nigeria, providing improved access to US dollars, and by other operational initiatives enabling our Nigerian business to be self-funding. Let's just park that quote and keep it on the screen right there. The reason why the Naira was devalued was because it was not reflecting, the rate was not realistic. That was the reason why funds were not coming in. That is the reason why the Tinubu administration had to devalue the currency, and then the CBN-led Cardoso raised interest rates in order to make the Naira attractive and bring FX fund inflows into the country to give the CBN the firepower to be able to sell funds to BDCs and also to clear the FX backlogs. This essentially validates, for all the conspiracy theorists out there, validates the CBN clearing of backlogs. And also to talk about that airline price war we're talking about, I talked about how the backlogs were cleared and allowed the airlines to start to reduce prices for international flights coming out of Nigeria. PZ Cussons has validated that by saying that repatriation has improved. We move on to shareholders' return because, again, there's two sides to the story. Let's go to the shareholders' returns quote here. They said shareholder returns have fallen short of our expectations, predominantly due to macroeconomic challenges in Nigeria, which since June of 2023 has experienced the single largest devaluation in the history of the currency. As I said several times, leave the matter of floating or not floating, it was a devaluation. That was the main focus. And then we're coming to the end here on complexity, right? They said that's the Nigeria complexity. And this is another leg I want us to focus on. They said it has concluded, that is the company, that in addition to the challenges of a significant exposure to Nigeria, the group is too complex for its size, with financial and human resources spread too thinly to generate consistent returns. This is now about the complex and competitive nature of the consumer goods space in Nigeria. On competitive advantage, let's skip to the competitive advantage quote. They said this means its competitive advantages have been constrained in comparison to those of both larger multinational companies and some focused smaller ones. So when we hear about companies saying they're exiting Nigeria, yes, it's the macroeconomic environment, yes, but it's also the ability to navigate the landscape, which smaller players in the consumer goods space, smaller indigenous players, are able to do better than some of these larger multinationals. Finally, I think we come to the quote from Jonathan Myers. He's the CEO of PZ Cussons. And he then says, we are evaluating the strategic options for our Africa operations. Nothing is ruled out. We see a number of tranches of potential value, whether that is to us or someone else, which means they might sell some of their Africa operations in order to exit. So the whole point of this is that there's two sides to this whole talk of devaluation. Nigeria is significant to these consumer companies. The monetary policy decisions that have been made, including the foreign exchange policy decisions that have been made, are bearing fruits, and you can see it in international companies talking about how they're able to repatriate cash out of the country, also airlines as well. That's all we got for today.
So, sir, see, I understand this, idea and everything, but let's not deceive ourselves. Nigeria's economy is in dire straits as we speak, and the company like PZ are reeling from it. I want to give you an assignment. Go and check PZ's number 10 years ago. I was just checking their profit about over 10 years ago. The profit was about 73 billion. Then the African market in Nigeria was doing close to 60% of the internal profit. But now, they were contributing about 69%, I should say, about 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But the numbers have depressed so much to about 35 million now. And it shows that the malaise in the Nigerian economy continues. And it's been a rout for the last 10 years. So I know you are looking for quick wins there, but Rotus is an indictment of how things have gone bad in this country, those PZ reports and what they reported. Because if you take a retrogressive look, it shows that the Nigerian economy has suffered a lot of bad leadership and has constantly slumped to a paltry number that you're seeing. I mean, from a company doing about 74 billion in revenue about 10 years ago, now struggling this much. So I think we now need to go back internally and say, how are we going to fix our economy? You talked about the Naira taking a beating constantly with a constant devaluation. How can we now go back and introspect and balance out our economy and see how we can now move further? Because you see, about 10 years ago, today were all of these local players too that were there, they were navigating. Because every market has those local players. It's a mix across the market. But these companies too were able to sustain because they had the capacity of scale. But now their scale is being eroded. That's the sad reality of the market. And that's what we should look at.
Yeah. Well, I hear you, Rotus, in terms of this analysis highlighting the fact that indeed the repatriation of funds challenges have been addressed, particularly under this Syrian governor and this administration. However, I think the sad tale for me of PZ Cussons and companies like Unilever, Sanofi from Bayern, Bayer and Baker, companies like GSK exiting, is the fact that beyond them not being able, the fact that their repatriating funds is great, but they are not able to sustain running a business in Nigeria. That's a big issue. That's a big problem. And so we can look at one side of it to see where, asserting the fact that this has worked in terms of repatriation of funds. But the bigger challenge is that the purchasing power of people in Nigeria has reduced, meaning that their profits have been impacted. We should look into that. It means the people are poorer for it. We are in a stagflation. People are not able to spend. And so whether it's for foreign companies or local industries, there's a big impact because we see local industries also closing shop. So these are bigger challenges for this government in terms of the prosperity of the economy, the prosperity of the people, to be able to not chase companies out, but attract more investors because of our numbers and the fact that people can actually purchase, or the purchasing power of the people is highly improved. So, I mean, for me, it's good points where you talk about repatriation of funds, but very sad story that companies are leaving Nigeria or thinking of leaving Nigeria and the African continent.
Okay, in 2023, within 10 months, 5 companies left Nigeria, including Procter & Gamble, GSK, Sanofi, Bolt, because they complained that the operating environment was not good enough. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria said on account of that, about 60,000 jobs were lost. Okay? Now, the latest story is about PZ. PZ has been in the West African regions since about 140 years ago.
Yeah, about 120 years.
140 years. Over 140 years ago. First from Sierra Leone, then it came to Nigeria. Nigeria, the biggest market, in Africa. And now it has gotten to a point now that the same PZ is saying that because of devaluation, sales in Nigeria no longer make sense in pound terms. And that too, sales have also declined because people don't have the purchasing power. These are the 2 big issues. Number 3 is that the company is stretched thin in terms of how it can operate. Now, this must be seen as a challenge by the Tinubu administration. As part of the renewed hope agenda, one of the things that this administration has to do is to pay more attention to creating an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. And, the government talks about renewed hope. It's not just about giving hope to Nigerians at home. It's also about giving hope to the business sector. And that is why we've been calling for a review of the trade policy and also of the industrial policy. I thought you were going to talk about Meta. Their shares fell, stock price fell about 19% because Mark Zuckerberg went to the quarterly earnings call yesterday talking about AI, Meta AI, talking about Meta eyeglasses, and the investors, were not happy with that because, again, the projection in terms of returns, looks bleak. So the value, the stock value of the business dropped by about 19%. But is Mark Zuckerberg bothered or not? Yesterday you were talking about Elon Musk and the challenge that he faced. But he quickly, adjusted himself, and the value of Tesla went up by about 13%. But thank you very much, Rotus. When you come tomorrow, please, let's talk about rice. We hear that the value of rice now is better, from 88,000 that you can now buy a 50 kg bag for 60,000. Is that something that we should celebrate, and that the Naira keeps improving? But we have to deal with the business environment. Thank you very much indeed, Rotus.